Right, so Egypt has seemingly affirmed whose side they are on with regards to Israel and everybody else they're currently engaged in attacks on by allowing an Israeli warship to pass through the Suez Canal on the 1st of November, citing legal convention as its reason for doing so. The reason it is hiding behind at any rate, despite having full sovereign control over the Suez Canal itself and having exercised that control in the past to actually restrict shipping. But not only that, under international treaty, it is obliged in the current climate to restrict Israeli shipping, especially a warship. So what has prompted this move from Egypt, as ill-advised a move as this is? Have they been leaned on? Are they afraid of something? Or is it something else entirely? Right, so Egypt have allowed a German-built SAR warship owned by Israel to pass through the Suez Canal, though with reports scant on this event, little more than video footage having been shared of the ship as it has travelled through the Suez Canal. So it isn't actually clear whether it's actually heading north or south through the canal. I would imagine south. I can't imagine this vessel has been docked at the only Israeli port south of the Suez Canal at Eilat, because that's been too much of a target for the likes of the Houthis especially, but also other Gazan allies as well, virtually bankrupting that port. But it hasn't been confirmed which way it is heading that I have seen. You can imagine it might be heading south to perhaps deal with those Houthis or to try and protect shipping in the Red Sea more. But why here and why now? Still a little bit of an unknown. Just the fact that Egypt have allowed this vessel through the Suez Canal, though, is enough to cause global outrage. However, so much so that statements have hurriedly come from the Egyptian authorities to plead innocence. The Suez Canal Authority, for example, the Egyptian government authority that oversees travel through the Suez Canal, has stated that the Suez Canal is committed to implementing the Constantinople Convention, which guarantees the freedom of navigation through the canal without discrimination based on the nationality of the ships passing through. Well, isn't that convenient? The Constantinople Convention of 1888 is what we're talking about here, is what they are basically citing, and it basically says that the canal remains open to all vessels of all nations during both peace and war without discrimination. Right, okay. Well, that's actually a little bit of an oversimplification, because like most international conventions that we've become accustomed to and have been introduced to since the events of October 7th certainly have thrust a lot of them into the spotlight a lot more, it gets broken down into various separate articles, and it is Article 10 of the Constantinople Convention that gives Egypt nowhere to hide on this score. It basically stating that Egypt have an exceptions clause here, in that while the Constantinople Convention guarantees free passage of ships, these rights also give Egypt specifically the right to block any ships it deems to be a threat to their national security. For instance, I've seen given on this is the blocking of the Philadelphia corridor at the southern border between Gaza and Egypt itself, now occupied by the IDF, has been for months, completely illegally, in defiance of the Camp David Accords of 1979, which brokered a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. That is a threat to Egyptian national security. Therefore, Israel could, in theory, throw open that crossing at any time, knock down the additional security measures Egypt had put in place themselves there, and let the entire population of Rafah flood into the Sinai Desert and suddenly become Egypt's problem. Perhaps that's the fear that's actually prompted passage through the Suez Canal. Perhaps that is why Egypt are doing this. Maybe they have been threatened with such a course of action. It's a rather spineless choice they've made, if so, though, but that is, of course, pure conjecture. There is, however, another point I'm going to raise which indicates Egyptian cooperation with Israel, which I'll come on to in a moment. You see, there's another treaty here which plays into the Constantinople Convention too, which also gives Egypt the right to stop shipping that they are signed up to, called the Treaty of Joint Defence of the League of Arab States. Bit of a mouthful. Which under Article 2 and 3 of this treaty calls for mutual defence if Article 2, the contracting states consider any armed aggression made against any one or more of them or their armed forces to be directed against them all. Article 3, in the event of the threat of war or the existence of an international emergency, the contracting states shall immediately proceed to unify their plans and defensive measures as the situation may demand. Now this one throws Egypt under the bus, in my view, more than the Constantinople Convention does, or it plays into the Constantinople Convention and what Egypt can do under that as a factor in this, because they are shafting other signatory states, in this instance, other signatories of this mouthful of a treaty, which includes Lebanon, most notably, given what Israel is doing there right now, invading, but also Yemen, where the Houthis are, and where perhaps his warship may be heading, as well as Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. Syria is also, of course, being attacked by Israel. Iran's embassy in Syria was the subject of a direct Israeli attack, which prompted that first Iranian response. Iraqi Islamic resistance are also fighting Israel. Frankly, the only one there in that list who isn't is Jordan, right now seemingly doing more to assist the US in denying flights from Lebanon to Iraq by way of a humanitarian air bridge. Now, if Egypt had never stopped a ship before having cited Article 10 previously, never acted upon the Arab League Treaty, they might have a point in not stopping this warship. But the trouble is they very much have. And they've done this before. Multiple occasions. For example, Egypt invoked Article 10 in 1954 when they told the UN Security Council they were going to assert their right to stop and seize vessels in the canal, a prelude to what would later become the Suez Crisis. Egypt did so again in 1967 during the Six-Day War by Israel, so this time directly as a result of Israeli actions. The canal was directly blockading Israeli shipping because of their attack when Israel invaded Palestine and seized large parts of it, displaced people and redrew the map of Palestine to largely what it is today, and placing Palestine under Israeli occupation as they have continued to be under ever since. Egypt also kept the canal closed from 1967 all the way through to 1975, all the way through the War of Attrition, the fight back by Egypt, Jordan and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which had come into being by that point, along with their allies, which lasted from 1967 to 1970, and following that through the 1973 Yom Kippur War, all the way through to 1975. So what gives? What is going on? Why has Egypt done this, chosen not to stop this ship? Where Egyptian officials are apparently denying any kind of alliance with Israel right now, another incident, as I alluded to earlier, is going to make them squirm in their seats a bit more, I fancy, especially in light of this latest event, as they come under the glare of other Arab nations wondering what the heck they might well be playing at. You see, there was news last week that a German vessel called the MV Catherine, loaded up with 150,000 kilograms of RDX explosives, was bound for Israeli military industries, which is the munitions production arm of the infamous Israeli arms manufacturer Elbit Systems. It was having a little bit of trouble docking on its way to Israel, given that various countries it had requested to dock at were flat refusing to entertain the idea. Malta was, I think, the last one that had said no. Boycott, divestment and sanctions once more coming into play. Well, guess where the MV Catherine ended up finally making port at? Not Israel, as you perhaps might have expected it to, but Alexandria in Egypt. Cue even more hell up, in which case. It took until Thursday of this week for the Egyptian military to deny again any form of alliance or military cooperation with Israel. But they conspicuously neither offered clarity on or officially denied reports that the cargo of the MV Catherine had been unloaded in Alexandria, or even that the ship was even docked there. However, the Egyptian Marine Consultancy Office, or EMCO, was, according to the Alexandria Port Authority, or their website at least, responsible for receiving the ship and unloading its military cargo, military inverted commas. Here's an excerpt from Middle East Eyes coverage, including comment by Amnesty International, who have now waded into this story as well. The Egyptian armed forces categorically deny the rumours circulating on social media and suspicious accounts, as well as the claims being promoted about assisting Israel in its military operations, the military spokesman said in a statement. We emphasise that there is no form of cooperation with Israel. Amnesty International called for the vessel's cargo to be blocked from reaching Israel. The deadly cargo believed to be on board the MV Catherine must not reach Israel, as there is a clear risk that such cargo would contribute to the commission of war crimes against Palestinian civilians, Amnesty International's Hussein Bayoumi told Middle East Eye. By knowingly transferring arms to Israel, including via transport of ships carrying arms and explosives, Egypt risks breaching their obligation not to encourage, aid or assist in violations of the Geneva Conventions. So Egypt is potentially putting itself in a great deal of bother and is doing nothing to help itself by raising so much suspicion about its actions here as well. Actions not just on one front at this point, but on two. And an Egyptian human rights lawyer called Ahmed Aboulayla Mahdi, having already filed a complaint with the public prosecutor against the Egyptian Prime Minister over this, Mustafa Madbouli, the head of Alexandria Port Authority as well, and the executive director of EMCO, citing not just national security concerns, but also for violating international agreements and potentially being seen to be aiding and abetting in war crimes by handling military goods bound for Israel to be used against the likes of Gaza and Lebanon. We absolutely do need to get to the bottom of Egypt's role in all of this, having seemingly now gone from peace negotiators, as they were, and potentially entering into aggression even against Israel for that breach of the Camp David Accords over the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah border crossing, to now looking more like Israel's allies. If Egypt don't want to be regarded as such, don't want to be seen as possibly allying themselves with genocide, perhaps not doing stuff like this might actually help. Boycott, diversion and sanctions was stopping that ship from docking. BDS is causing Israel all manner of headaches, and that is because BDS functionally works. For another success story in making life economically tough for Israel right now, check out this video recommendation here. As you suggested next watch, as another dose of karma lands on the blue and white state, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next feed. Cheers, folks.